Hey everybody, today we are going to be digging into some STIG checklists and grabbing open items out of them and outputting that information to a CSV file. The purpose of this in the first place would be if you want to double check and make sure all of the open items you have documented in your STIG checklist are maybe documented as POA&Ms, or if you need to produce a report for management or something like that. It's a good way for tracking all the open items that you have. In case you're preparing for a CCRI or something like that. Alright, anyways, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so first we're going to declare a variable where I call it all items. You can call it whatever you want, but we get all of the STIG checklists themselves out of the directory, and the user will provide the path. The user right now is us. So let's see where I have some STIG checklists stored. Just so happens to be in documents. Let me go there. Get the full path. I have this ESXi one and another ESXi one. This one's not actually blank. I just don't feel like changing it, but I've made some open items on both of them, as well as added some comments and finding details. So anyways, let's give this thing a path here. Get child item path here. And again, we're only looking for STIG checklists, but let's see what we get so far. We're getting text files, we're getting a database, key file. Alright, so let's throw in the -include switch with this commandlet, and that way we can specify exactly what type of files we want to include in the output. So let's only include .ckl files. However, looks like this would work, right? Maybe, but it's not going to work. See, I get no output when I call that variable down here. The reason it doesn't work when you're using the -include switch, make sure to also add a wildcard here in the path you're feeding it. Good. Now we're only getting the checklists. Okay. So let's go ahead and do a for loop so we can go through each of the individual checklists. I mean, sometimes you could be doing this against a directory of 100 at a time, so it's very useful. So when you're creating a for loop, just so you know, this is a random variable name. You could have named it anything you wanted besides a reserved keyword. Alright, so for each CKL, let's turn this into an XML object, because we're going to be wanting to dig through the XML tags, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. And just so you know, if you have to do this recursively, you'd add a recursive switch in the get child item, and you'd also have to alright, I'm not even going to get into that. Anyways, just, you know, this is just for one directory here, but if you need to do it recursively, it's a little different. Alright, so what we're doing here, we created a for loop for all the different checklists. So for each individual checklist, we're going to turn it into an XML object saved to this variable named single checklist, and we have to use the get content of the actual checklist in order to do that. So let's just run all of this so everything's initialized, and let's call single CKL here, see what it's saved as. Okay, cool. PowerShell has a built-in get type function. You can call on variables and it gives you the type. Alright, good. It's an XML document. We turned it into an XML document. Perfect. So now that we have the contents there, let's actually start digging in. So first and foremost, what I like to do is I pull it up in a text file. So let's open this one. Alright, so as you can see, the checklist file is actually just like a certain type of XML schema, and we see a bunch of XML tags here. So what I like to do is create a variable and call it each vulnerability, and then start digging into the checklist itself. So I'm going to dig into this checklist tag here. We're trying to get to the vulnerability information in the checklist, actually. So we're trying to get to the finding details and whatnot. As well as the vulnerability numbers. And the severity and all of that stuff. So that way we can produce a nice report. So anyways, to get there, again, we have to dig into these XML tags. So right now we're in checklist. We're going to have to go into STIGs. We're going to have to go into iStig. And in iStig, you can get like the, the actual name of the STIG and like some good description of everything. But we're going to also want to go into vuln, this vuln tag here. And that's where we'll actually be able to enumerate the vulnerability number and all of that sort of stuff. Alright, so we're in checklist. Let's go to STIGs, then iStig. Powershell is nice too. It'll recommend like, what it sees as the next tag here. Alright, so let's see if that worked. First and foremost, I like to run everything, initialize my variables, then let's call it. Sweet. So now we're getting some information, and as you can see, we have a status property here. So we already have statuses we can pull. As I said, I've marked a few things as open. If you guys wanted to see what this actually looks like open in a checklist, this is what we're looking at. So we have these open items, these not a findings, then this random open item here. So we have these open items, a few not reviewed, these not a findings, then this random open here. So we could see that it seems to be accurate. Anyways, since we're going to want to go through all of the individual vulnerabilities themselves, we have to do another for loop. So for each vuln, let's do this. For each single vuln. I'm sorry, I'm very not creative with my variable names. Alright, actually, since we are looking for all open items, I like to do this at the top and give the user an option if he wants, or if they want to change it from open or not reviewed. These are the valid options. So anyways, we're gonna be able to feed this script what status of the vulnerability we're looking for, and that way we could produce it in a report. I've been able to find not reviewed items before at a random company I was working for, and even though they had hundreds of checklists, it's just hard to be able to find that manually. Alright, anyways. Alright, so here we'll create an if statement. So for each individual vulnerability, right, in terms of all of them that we have saved to this variable, this array here, if the single vuln.status matches the vuln status we have up here, and again, I'm saying if the individual vulnerability dot status property, again like we called down here when we called dot status on all of them. So if the status matches what we're looking for, that's when we'll actually go ahead and grab what we need. So here let's actually save it to a new variable. Open or actually it looks like I'm coding malware just because of how horrible I am with my variable names. I'm sorry. Single vuln status vuln equals let's actually do single vuln. So saves an open, no, saves a matching status item, in this case open, since that's what we're looking for. Alright, just make sure we can initialize everything. Status phone, boom. So, we do have one. We have it captured. Look at that. One of the comments says this is justified because of X reason and Y reason. I swear I do my job. They have this open vulnerability. They're scumbags. Just kidding. Alright, anyways, so from here, if you wanted to, we could save the status of the vulnerability to a variable. God, I'm horrible because I'm sorry. I keep typing or using status in my variables. Status equals so status vul again is the individual open vulnerability. We're saving that there. Comments equals status vul dot comments. Defining details. Oh, I'd also like to declare an object up here as an array. We'll use this later because we're going to be building an object so we can format it properly and output it to a CSV nicely in a report. Alright, anyways, some properties saved to variables for future output. Alright, as you can see, where we are currently, we don't have vulnerability numbers or anything like that. So, how can we go about getting that? Anyways, let's actually initialize this all first and just make sure. Finding details will produce nothing because I didn't put anything there. Comments should produce something. Good. And status obviously should too. Okay. Good. So far we have dug in that deep. Let's just make sure everything looks good. Alright. So, what I've found is a good way of accessing the vulnerability number and a bunch of other good descriptors that you're going to need in your output is by doing the .child nodes, and I save that to something conveniently called child nodes. So let's just make sure that's valid. Boom. So now that we saved child nodes to another variable, look at that. We have vulnerability number, severity, rule version, rule title, all of these and all of this information nicely laid out for us. So we can actually start saving that stuff to variables as well to get it ready to output. Okay, so let's do severity equals. So the question is, how do we access whichever index we're looking for? And like for example, like how would I get severity? You know. So what I like to do is there's two ways to do it. For example, I would access it this way. Let's see if that works. Boom, we got severity. So the reason I did this is because it's the second index, and the index always starts at 0. So if I wanted the vul number, I'd start at the 0 index. Child nodes 0. And if I wanted, I don't know, the vul discuss, let's do rule title. Which one's rule title here? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which would be the 5th index, right? Okay, cool. So as far as it goes now, if we were to output this to a file, you see how we're pulling vuln attribute and attribute data. When you output it to a file, it outputs it as like system.xml element, which looks really ugly. So we actually have to access the actual plain text under attribute data. So to do that, you can just do this on what you're calling. Let's initialize all that stuff. Rule title, severity, vulnum status comments finding details. Okay, yeah, there was nothing written in finding details anyways. This is the one it's pulling, by the way. Right, 239.319. Yeah. See how it's pulling this comment? This is justified. I swear I do my job. When we called the comments variable. Alright, anyways. So let's start building out the object. And I call it all objects. There's about a million ways you can build an object, but this to me, I like the most. So in the context of a CSV file or something like that, what we put on the left side is going to be the column titles. What we put on the right side is what we're actually setting it as in the value. So status equals status comments equals comments. I almost just put child notes. Vulnum equals sometimes, by the way, in my hash tables that when I'm building an object here, this notation is to build a hash table, and this is like the syntax for hash tables. And I will say sometimes I forget these semicolons at the end, and things still work, but I would probably assume it's best practice to keep those. And I did this plus equal here, so we are appending a new object for each individual thing to this array. Alright, so now that we've done that, boom. Just so you know, in PowerShell, when I'm trying to figure out where I have like closing braces and everything, I just click at where I see a closing brace, and it highlights where it started too. So it's a good way of tracking down, like, see this if conditional statement, end of if statement. I just like doing those little notes for myself. So end of. It's called a nested for loop because it's inside of another for loop itself. Again, we started off with this for loop where we just did the checklist. Alright. So now let's play around with outputting it. So the object's called all objects. See if this works. I like using outgrid view when I'm preparing to output things to a CSV file because it just outputs it to the foreground for you, like so you can see it on your screen. So you don't have to go around and save a million different test files and take a look at the output there. Nice. So we got output. We have finding details on the left, vulnum, rule title, comment, severity status. Okay, so let's say you wanted to sort this, however, like instead of just having all the fields kind of wherever they want. So before we pipe it to outgrid view or export CSV, we want to do a select object, and then I like doing also a sort object. So let's actually select which properties we want. Let's say we wanted to do comments first. Actually, let's do vulnum first. That would make sense. Vulnum status comments. No, let's do severity. Rule title. Vulnum status severity rule title. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What am I missing? Comments. I swear I already typed comments. Alright, select. Boom. Nice. It's nice and sorted for us. So we have exactly what we opted to sort for. So vulnum status severity, rule title, finding details, comments. And I only have one comment in the actual STIG checklist. So here's our final output. This is what it looks like in the STIG checklist. Let's see how many, what is this, like 20 open or something? Yeah. Again, we're only pulling open items here. Oh, let's see if not a finding pulls. Let's just test that. Boom, status not a finding. And let's do status not reviewed. We got a ton of not revieweds here. But anyways, so now that we know it looks kind of nice in output grid view, we could replace that with the CSV path, users, admin, documents, test video, CSV. I always like to do the no type information switch when I export a CSV file. Otherwise you'll see like this row at the beginning with random stuff. And I always like to do append just to be safe. I don't know. I always do append unless I'm not appending to something, of course. Oh, anyways, let's go see if it output there. Test video, it's right here. I'm gonna open it with Notepad. It output it to a CSV. Yeah, this would look nice in a CSV, so you guys can see. Comma separated values. Okay, let's see. Do I have anything else to show? I feel like I had something else. Oh, yeah. If you want to make sure it's just a little nicer for the whoever's running the script, I usually do a test path at the end and like test to see if that path exists. Let's do test video 1 because we already created the other one. And then I write host like, you know, foreground color green, successfully created output file here. Let's see if that works. Boom. And yeah, you could also do an else statement at the end here. But anyways, that is how to get all the open items from a directory of STIG checklists and output that to a CSV file.